Hello and welcome. You are watching World Business Report here on News 9 Live. I'm Krishna Kumar. And we begin with the United States of America, where former U.S. President Donald Trump has clinched a victory at the New Hampshire primaries, strengthening his hold on the Republican nomination race. Now, despite her strong efforts, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley got the second place and now faces mounting pressure to exit the race to become the Republican nominee for the upcoming U.S. presidential elections. Nikki Haley delivered a defiant response, however, vowing to persist and amplify her criticism of Trump's leadership. She is positioning herself as a catalyst for generational change in the Republican Party and American politics, as well as unity in the Republican Party as well. Now, as the political stage is set for a high-stakes November rematch against President Joe Biden, Donald Trump has now achieved a historic milestone. He stands as the first Republican presidential candidate to win open races in both the Iowa caucus as well as New Hampshire, since these states assumed the lead in the election calendar of the U.S. back in the year 1976. This achievement underscores the rapid and formidable support that Trump has been garnering from Republicans across the board, and it has solidified his status as their nominee for the third consecutive time. Bear in mind, Donald Trump stands as the number one lead after that challenge from Vivek Ramaswamy, the Indian origin candidate who got out of the race early and chose to immediately throw the support behind Donald Trump and was even called as the possible vice president candidate. And keeping it with America, on Wall Street, the S&P 500 notched up its third consecutive record high close, confounding market expectation and underlining the resilience of the current bull run in the U.S. markets. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones dipped 0.25%, while the S&P added 0.3%, and the Nasdaq added more than 0.4%. The shares of Procter & Gamble gained by over 4% as the top gainers after it topped the second quarter profit expectations. More details in this Reuters report. Take a look.
The S&P 500 notched its third straight all-time closing high in what was otherwise a mixed day for U.S. stocks on Tuesday. The Dow dipped 0.25%, while the S&P added 0.3%, and the Nasdaq added more than 0.4%. Whether the benchmark S&P 500 can climb for a fourth session largely depends on corporate earnings, which were a mixed bag on Tuesday. Among the winners, Verizon Communications, up more than 6.5% after forecasting a strong annual profit and posting its highest quarterly subscriber additions in nearly 2 years. Shares of Procter & Gamble gained over 4% after it topped second quarter profit expectations. On the flip side, 3M tumbled 11% after forecasting dour annual earnings, while Johnson & Johnson dipped more than 1.5% after reporting quarterly results just above expectations. Liz Miller, president of Summit Place Financial Advisors, says a key factor separating winners from losers was their outlook, with investors rewarding companies who saw solid growth ahead.
Procter and Gamble was sort of flat to even nudging down when the report first came out, but the stock completely turned around on the conference call when guidance was given to that strength in North America and a very positive outlook for 2024. And that's the common theme across all the winners today.
Netflix, which closed up more than 1%, rallied more than 8% in after-hours trading when the video streaming service reported subscriber growth that blew past Wall Street estimates for the fourth quarter. Shares of D.R. Horton ended down more than 9% after the homebuilder missed estimates for first-quarter profit. Investors are awaiting Friday's Personal Consumption Expenditure, or PCE, index, the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge, as well as this week's first estimate of fourth-quarter GDP, both of which should play key roles in the Federal Reserve's next decision on interest rates when it meets at the end of the month.
Meanwhile, the Bank of Japan is making waves in signaling a deep-rooted conviction hitting its inflation goals. The move is widely expected as policymakers are allowing more time to see if wage rises in Japan will broaden enough to keep inflation sustainably at its 2% target.
The Bank of Japan maintained its ultra-easy monetary policy on Tuesday. The move was widely expected as policymakers allow more time to see if wage rises will broaden enough to keep inflation sustainably at its 2% target. But the central bank also signalled its growing belief that conditions for phasing out its huge stimulus were falling into place, suggesting an end to negative interest rates could be nearing. At the two-day meeting that ended on Tuesday, the BOJ kept its short-term rate target at minus 0.1%. Negative rates have been in place since 2016, and ending them would be a major shift away from the radical stimulus of former Governor Haruhiko Kuroda. BOJ Governor Kazuo Ueda gave no hints on whether the bank would pull short-term interest rates out of negative territory at its upcoming meetings in March or April, which many economists expect. He said hopes of Japan hitting the bank's inflation target were rising.
The prospects of seeing trend inflation hit 2% are gradually heightening. That is a desirable development. But it is hard to quantify how close we have come.
His remarks contrasted with those made last month. In December, Ueda said there was high uncertainty on whether a positive cycle of rising wages and inflation would fall into place. The central bank's update led to a rebound in the Japanese yen Tuesday. It also pushed up the country's short-term government bond yield to a one-month high. That as investors priced in an increasing chance of an end to negative rates in March or April.
Now, amidst a lot of turbulence in its markets, there are now reports suggesting that China is actively weighing a stock market rescue package. And the government is looking to rescue China's stock markets in a first-time ever sort of a move. This Reuters report tells you all about it.
China plans multi-billion-dollar measures to stabilize its falling stock market. A Bloomberg report Tuesday put some numbers on the plan, citing people close to the matter. It said policymakers want to mobilize about $279 billion as part of a stabilization fund to buy shares onshore. The money will reportedly come mainly from offshore accounts of state-owned enterprises. Chinese stocks were up and down on Tuesday following the report. Shares rose immediately after the news, then slipped lower, only to later turn up again. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index closed 2.6% higher in the end, its biggest one-day gain in 2 months. The Shanghai Composite Index rose a more modest 0.5%. China's markets have had a bad start to the year. Foreign investors have stayed away due to patchy economic growth and data pointing to more property market turmoil, including a new slump in home sales. On Monday, the government said it would step up mid- and long-term fund injections in the capital market. It said it wanted to strengthen stability and promote healthy development. But one leading investor said that while the move was welcome, they feared it was still inadequate due to being under 2% of GDP. Overseas funds have sold roughly $1.6 billion in Chinese equities so far this year, according to Morgan Stanley. Chinese investors have also largely avoided stocks. The country's Securities Regulatory Commission did not respond to a Reuters request for a comment on the latest reports.
Now, Bitcoin, the flagship cryptocurrency or the most famous cryptocurrency in the world, has tumbled below that high of $40,000 mark, and it is the lowest point it has marked since its debut in the ETF market.
Bitcoin has tumbled to 7-week lows around $40,000. It's the lowest level since the launch of 11 exchange-traded funds featuring the cryptocurrency earlier this month. The eCoin's debut on New York exchanges had sparked enthusiasm among fans. Bitcoin gained around 70% ahead of the launch as traders bet the ETFs would help draw in more everyday investors. It's now fallen back by around 20%, and some analysts say the slump was always likely. They note that Bitcoin also tumbled following other big crypto events, such as the IPO for major exchange Coinbase. Other market watchers say Bitcoin just hasn't been able to compete with regular stocks over recent weeks. Money has poured into equities as US markets surge. On Monday, the S&P 500 index hit a fresh record high for a second straight session. Tech stocks have led the gains after Taiwan chip giant TSMC said last week that AI would drive a boom in demand for high-end silicon.
Now, shifting focus to the United Kingdom, maintaining a steadfast stance, the UK is resolute in its campaign to degrade Houthi capabilities despite facing challenges on multiple fronts. And listen in to what Britain's Foreign Minister David Cameron had to say about this.
Since we last took action 10 days ago, there have been over 12 attacks on shipping by the Houthis in the Red Sea. These attacks are illegal, they're unacceptable, and what we've done again is send the clearest possible message that we will continue to degrade their ability to carry out these attacks whilst sending the clearest possible message that we back our words and our warnings with action. What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in the Red Sea. Let's be absolutely clear, we have no quarrel with the Yemeni people. Indeed, our aid feeds over 100,000 Yemenis every month, using the sea lane, delivering that aid, which is precisely the sea lane that the Houthis are trying to close.
Keeping it with the war in Gaza, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has affirmed Israel's determination to push forward in Gaza until achieving what he terms as quote-unquote victory.
Yesterday was one of the hardest days since the war broke out. We lost 24 of our best sons, the heroes who fell defending the homeland. Together with the citizens of Israel, I grieve for each and every one of them. I hug the families whose world has changed forever. From here we send a prayer for the peace of our wounded. The IDF is conducting a thorough examination of the disaster. We must learn the lessons and do everything for the peace of our soldiers. We are in the midst of an unjust war. In this war, there are great achievements, including today in completing the encirclement of Khan Yunis, but there are also very heavy prices. We bow our heads to the memory of our fallen, and yet we do not for a moment stop striving for an irreplaceable goal, the achievement of absolute victory. Together we will fight, and together we will win.
Even as Israel pushes forward in Gaza, the World Food Programme, WFP, has reported that very little aid is reaching northern Gaza at this moment. The humanitarian crisis in the region is only deepening, and the lack of sufficient aid exacerbates the challenges faced by the local population. More details in this report.
It's extremely difficult to get into the places where we need to go to in Gaza, especially in northern Gaza. So very few assistance has made it beyond the southern part of the Gaza Strip. We have more than 500,000 people in Gaza are facing catastrophic food insecurity levels, and the risk of famine increases each day as the conflict is limiting the delivery of life-saving food assistance to people in need. There was 2 convoys around the 11th and the 13th of January that were carrying 200 tons of food for 15,000 people. 15,000 people. That's really a very, very small numbers. We're also, children that are being evacuated to get treatment on the Egyptian side of the border. Reports of malnutrition and children who've lost a lot of weight, extremely thin. So we're seeing a very worrisome situation in terms of children's malnutrition. Of course, the shortage of water is making things worse because children get weaker with diarrhea, which makes things quite.
We are taking a very short breather here at the stage. We'll be back with lots more on World Business Report. Don't go anywhere. Keep it with News 9 Live.
हमारी नारी शक्ति को सशक्त करने से ही देश सशक्त होने वाला है।
हर महीने महिलाओं को 1500 रुपए प्रति माह दिलवाया जाएगा।
What Nitish Kumar did to provide cycle to girls, so they could safely, quickly move out of the house, go to school, and quickly come back. Tring, 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 tring.
माँ अन्नपूर्णा तू ही, माँ अन्नपूर्णा है तू ही वीणा वादनी, हे शक्ति स्वरूपा जगदम्बा, हे नारी तू नारायणी।
News is now content. Just stream it. Download the world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
You are watching World Business Report, and Netflix has secured the streaming rights for WWE Raw in a $5 billion agreement. Along with this deal, Netflix also continues its triumph, reporting a staggering gain of 13 million customers in the year 2023 and posting its best surge since the onset of the pandemic.
Taking a big step into live events, Netflix on Tuesday reached a 10-year, $5 billion deal with World Wrestling Entertainment, becoming the exclusive home of WWE's weekly program Raw starting in January 2025. With an option to extend the deal for another 10 years or opt out after the initial 5. According to the company, the partnership will put Raw on the streaming platform in the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, and Latin America, among other territories. Raw, which airs on Mondays, is currently the top show on the Comcast-owned USA Network, where it brings in 17.5 million unique viewers over the course of the year, something Netflix will find valuable. The streaming pioneer will also exclusively telecast outside the U.S. all WWE shows and specials, including SmackDown, as well as pay-per-view live events. Netflix began experimenting with live events last year, with comedian Chris Rock's stand-up special Selective Outrage. It also has found success with sports-related programming. Mark Shapiro, president of TKO Group Holdings, the parent firm of WWE, told Reuters that Netflix threaded the needle perfectly by offering live sports programming that comes with a spine of entertainment. The Raw deal marks Netflix's first long-term bet on live events and could help draw loyal followers that turn to WWE each week for bouts between the likes of CM Punk and Cody Rhodes. News of the deal sent shares of TKO up 21% in early trading. Shares of Netflix were flat.
Meanwhile, e-commerce giant eBay has announced a layoff of around 1,000 jobs, accounting for 9% of its full-time workforce. And that eBay says is because of a decrease in its overall work for external contractors. eBay has acknowledged that staffing and expenses have outpaced its growth, prompting organizational changes to enhance its own agility and align eBay's teams for a better end-to-end customer experience. But all said and done, the layoff season continues in the tech sector from 2023 into the year 2024. Meanwhile, market analysts are on high alert as Ericsson has issued a warning of a potential market decline in the year 2024. The tech sector, a key player in global markets, is certainly facing headwinds, and Ericsson's cautionary statement has just added to all those growing concerns. More details in this report.
Ericsson beat operating profit expectations in the fourth quarter, but the Swedish tech giant had disappointing news for investors Tuesday. The company expects a further decline in 5G gear demand from mobile operators this year. Telecom suppliers expect a challenging year ahead as 5G equipment sales are slowing in North America. India is a high-growth market, and that also is set for a slowdown. Providers have seen a few years of high demand for 5G equipment, but buying was lower last year, which led firms like Ericsson to lay off thousands of employees to save costs. The company said it could look at further cost cuts this year, and that could potentially include layoffs. Operating profit, excluding restructuring charges, fell to $705 million, down from $773 million a year ago. It was above the number expected by analysts, though net sales fell 16% in the quarter and missed estimates. Ericsson's shares were down 2% by the afternoon.
The symbolic doomsday clock, an indicator maintained by atomic scientists, remains unchanged despite all the recent global events. According to Cambridge University's expert on existential threat, Paul Ingram, the catastrophic risks that we face as a planet, largely through our own deliberate activities, hasn't exactly increased.
How long does humanity have left? The doomsday clock says we're 90 seconds away from midnight, after atomic scientists kept the predicted points of the world's annihilation, as they did last year, as close to midnight as ever before. But what does that really mean? And where did the concept of the doomsday clock even come from? The doomsday clock is a symbolic timepiece showing how close the world is to ending. Midnight marks the theoretical point of annihilation. Every year, scientists move the hands of the clock closer to or further away from midnight, based on their reading of existential threats at that time. Cambridge University's expert on existential threat, Paul Ingram, explains.
It emerged at the beginning of the Cold War to give a sense of the urgency to achieve nuclear disarmament and to climb out of the abyss that we were facing in the early 1950s. And in more recent times, it has taken on climate change and emerging disruptive technology to give a sense of the risks, the catastrophic risks that we face as a planet, largely through our own deliberate activities.
Albert Einstein was among a group of atomic scientists who created the clock back in 1947. These days, a Chicago-based NGO called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists updates the time annually. A board of scientists and other experts in nuclear technology and climate science, including 13 Nobel laureates, discuss world events and determine where to place the hands of the clock each year. When the clock first started ticking more than 75 years ago, it sat at 7 minutes to midnight. In 1991, the clock was the furthest it has ever been from doomsday at 17 minutes. That was the time when the Cold War ended and the United States and Soviet Union signed the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty that substantially reduced both countries' nuclear weapons arsenals.
If we if we maintain an addiction to competition and to conflict as a way of managing our social interactions and our interactions with the ecosystems, we will perish. I think as the threats get larger and that we become more aware and we understand them better, there is hope, I think, that we do change our practices and the way we think and approach these things.
There is hope, but talking about atomic scientists, we have to shift focus to the world of cinema now, where, interestingly, the film Oppenheimer has taken the lead with the maximum number of nominations for the upcoming Oscar Awards, beating Barbie. But bear in mind, all the talk has been about how come Barbie got so many nominations. The lead actor, Ryan Gosling, being nominated for Best Actor, but however, Margot Robbie not being nominated for Best Actress. But fact of the matter is that Oppenheimer has beaten Barbie in terms of the overall tally of nominations. More details in this report.
Welcome to one of the most exciting days of the year, the Oscars nominations announcement.
Oppenheimer.
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 Guys to the left, please. Everyone to the left.
Sorry, you're just getting a few shots of Emma if you don't mind. Sorry.
How are you guys? Here we go.
And now for our final category.
I can't wait! Let's read them together.
And that's all we have time for in this edition of World Business Report. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishna Kumar signing off.